Think your Monday was rough? The Romans didn't just punish, they made a whole event out of it. They had a method for everyone, criminals and even unlucky senators. Some of these are so twisted, they make modern horror movies look boring. And trust me, the last one, it's straight out of hell. Have you ever sat in a chair so uncomfortable it makes you question your life choices? Roman torturers took that concept and ran with it, right into a nightmare. Enter the torture chair, a seat covered in spikes, designed not for thinking deep thoughts or sipping wine, but for making sure you never sat down again. Victims were strapped and pressed in so the spikes pierced deep, and then the whole setup was heated from below. Because apparently, sitting on nails wasn't awful enough. They had to add fire. This thing wasn't built to kill you quickly. It was designed to turn you into a slow-cooked warning. Your skin stuck to the metal, your screams echoed through stone walls, and your only hope was that someone fainted before you did. The Romans didn't invent this kind of cruelty for fun. They used it to make a point. And that point was, don't mess with the empire. Not a great day to be a rebel, or to have a spine, really. And if you thought the worst part was the chair, you haven't heard what they did to your hands and feet next. If you think the cross was just a Christian symbol, Rome would like a word. Crucifixion wasn't just punishment, it was the ancient version of a public service announcement. Don't mess with Rome. And it didn't matter who you were. A slave, a low-level criminal who stole the wrong senator's goblet. Up you go the cross. They'd strip you down, march you through the streets, and nail you to a wooden post like a human billboard. It wasn't a quick ordeal. Victims could take hours, sometimes days, to die suffocating slowly while birds picked at their faces and kids threw rocks for fun. Roman soldiers didn't exactly rush the process either. They'd sometimes break your legs just to make sure you couldn't push up for breath. One Roman historian even noted how the Appian Way was once lined with thousands of crucified slaves after Spartacus's revolt, their bodies hanging for miles. It was quite the scenery. But if you think that was Rome at its worst, wait until you hear what they did with metal cages and a little thing called starvation art. Let's say you were unlucky enough to be deemed an enemy of Rome, but they weren't in a hurry to kill you. Enter the metal cage, a twisted piece of psychological torture dressed up as architecture. They'd lock you inside, hoist the cage into the open air, and leave you exposed to the sun, the cold, and the charming company of scavenger birds. And you weren't hanging out in some cozy town square either. They'd often hang these cages outside city gates, where travelers and locals could all enjoy the slow-motion horror show on their commute. You didn't just die in a cage. You rotted in one. No water or food and no dignity. After a few days, the screaming stopped, the twitching slowed, and the bones started showing. Crows loved it. So did flies. People even took bets on how long someone would last. It was ugly and very public, just how the Romans liked it. But if you think being trapped in a bird buffet was bad, just wait until you hear about the Roman version of an open mic night, where the act was getting burned alive. You'd think fire was reserved for warmth and feasts, not in ancient Rome. If they wanted to make a statement and roast someone while doing it, they'd tie you to a post and light the kindling. It's a simple setup, but horrifying results. The smoke hit first, choking you before the flames even touched skin. Then the heat peeled away at everything, slowly and theatrically, because Roman crowds didn't come out for a fast death. This was meant to draw attention, turn heads, and silence rebels before they even thought of acting out. The worst part? Public festivals occasionally featured executions like they were halftime shows. Burn a traitor, throw some wine, enjoy the screams. And if the crowd was lucky, the condemned might curse the emperor before the fire took them. That always got a cheer. But if you thought fire was cruel, wait until you find out what they did with barrels. And they weren't filled with wine either. This one sounds ridiculous until you realize how twisted it really was. They'd take a wooden barrel, slice it open just enough to fit a person, and then cram you inside. Naked, arms trapped, legs folded like a broken table. The top was sealed with just your head poking out. Seems quirky, right? Now here's the Roman twist. They'd force-feed you milk and honey until your stomach turned into a churning swamp. And just when you thought the humiliation was over, they'd leave you in the sun to stew. The idea was to attract bugs, flies, maggots, anything with wings or legs would feast on the skin as it softened in the heat. Over days, sometimes weeks, the body would decay while still alive. The milk fermented, the honey glazed the skin, and the victim became a walking buffet for every crawling thing in the empire. No swords or no fire, just time to rot, and a swarm of Roman-approved nightmares. If you think that was grim, just wait until you hear about the water torture technique that didn't involve waterboarding, but something way, way weirder. All you need is just one drop of water, over and over. Sounds harmless? But Roman torture didn't always go for the guts. Sometimes they aimed straight for the sanity. Victims were strapped down so tightly they couldn't even twitch. Their heads were fixed in place, neck muscles straining, eyes staring at the ceiling, and then drip. Water, cold and steady, fell from just high enough to sting. First on the forehead, then again and again. At first, you'd flinch, then your skin would go numb, then the rhythm of the drops would worm into your thoughts like a drumbeat you couldn't silence. Hours turned to days. Victims would scream and sob, anything to stop the next drop. But that was the point. The drip wasn't meant to kill you fast. It was designed to make you beg for anything else. And just when you thought the Romans couldn't get any more creative, they brought animals into the mix. Because why stab someone when you can feed them to something with teeth? If you've ever thought, there's no way humans could be that cruel, let me introduce you to Roman lunch hour entertainment. Forget gladiator fights. For a second, those were just the appetizers. The real show was watching criminals or just unlucky citizens get tossed into the arena with wild animals. Lions, boars, basically anything that could bite or claw. And the crowd, they loved every second of it. This was a spectacle with a side of blood. Sometimes they'd spice it up, maybe tie a man to a post and smear him with animal fat so the lions had a little extra motivation, or blindfold him just for fun so the fear hit before the claws did. There's even one account of a man tied inside a hollow bull, then gored through the metal as the crowd cheered. If you think that's the worst way to use animals, wait until we get to what they did with rats and where they put them. Imagine you're tied down, sweating, maybe still hoping for a last-minute pardon. Then someone walks in carrying a clay pot, and it's not for soup. Inside, a rat, hungry, frantic, and about to become your personal nightmare. The pot gets placed on your bare stomach. Then they start heating the pot from the outside slowly. And guess what? Rats hate heat. With nowhere else to go, the rat does what any creature would do. It digs. And since the only exit is through you, that's exactly the route it takes. The Roman guards didn't even have to do the killing themselves. Nature took care of that part, one shriek at a time. It is slow and really messy, but it was horrifyingly effective. One Roman writer described it as a punishment worthy of liars and thieves, which is rich, coming from an empire that had lying senators and backstabbing friends as a national pastime. But if you think a rat burrowing through your gut was the peak of creative sadism, Rome had one more trick up its sleeve. Ever heard of death by saw? Because the next method slices everything you thought you knew about cruelty right down the middle. There's creative lighting, and then there's Roman lighting. And let's just say the empire really pushed the boundaries of ambiance. Ever heard of the human candle? In Emperor Nero's Rome, if you annoyed the emperor or just existed as a Christian at the wrong time, you might find yourself covered in pitch, tied to a pole, and turned into a literal torch. They weren't even subtle about it. These weren't quiet, back-alley executions. This was open air, party-time horror. Nero would host garden events at night, and instead of lanterns, he lit up his guests, the unwilling ones. One ancient writer even described Nero strolling through his garden as his candles burned, enjoying the view. You can bet nobody declined his invitations after that, not unless they had a very good excuse and a faster horse. What makes this especially twisted was how normal it became. There were rumors people started rating the burn time, betting on how long the victim would stay upright. It wasn't punishment anymore. It was Emperor Nero's weird idea of entertainment. But if turning people into light bulbs sounds insane, just wait. Because in the final chapter, we're going with animals used in the creepiest way possible. There's brutal, there's horrifying, and then there's poena culae, a Roman punishment so deranged it makes everything else on this list feel like a warm-up act. Forget fire pits or crucifixion. Rome had a special trick up its toga for anyone bold or stupid enough to murder their own parents. And no, it didn't involve a clean sword or a swift fall. This was death by sack, with animals. The method? First, you'd be beaten senseless with blood-soaked rods, because apparently regular rods weren't dramatic enough. Then just when you thought your public humiliation was over, the real show began. You'd be sewn into a giant leather sack, not alone, but with a whole zoological nightmare stuffed in beside you. A viper for poison, a dog for teeth, a monkey for chaos, and a rooster presumably to scream alongside you. And once that twisted sack of nightmares was all stitched up, into the river it went. No trial extensions, no last meal. Just you, your menagerie of new roommates, and a watery grave. Why these animals? Historians still argue. Some think it was symbolic. Dogs for betrayal, roosters for betrayal at dawn, snakes for evil, monkeys for you know what? Nobody's really sure. Others think the Romans just wanted to make the condemned's final moments as wildly unpredictable as possible. You might get bitten. You might drown. You might be clawed to death by an angry chimpanzee in a panic spiral. Whatever happened, you weren't getting out. There's barely any proof it was even actually done. No sacks have been found, no rivers dredged for monkey corpses. It's all written record, secondhand stories, and some legal scholars' idea of justice with flair, which only makes it worse. And just when you think you've hit the peak of Roman madness, there's a twist. The last known case? Not ancient Rome. Try early 1700s Germany. That's right. Somewhere in Europe, while people were composing Baroque music and inventing the piano, someone else was stuffing a guy into a bag full of animals and chucking it into the river. It's a small world until you're zipped up in a sack with a chicken. So which one twisted your stomach the most? Was it the lions, the human torches, or the rat box nightmare fuel? Tell us in the comments if you made it through all 10 without flinching. And hey, if you enjoy diving into history's darkest corners, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. There's way more madness where this came from. See you next time, and bring a stronger stomach.